Do do do, theme song. Do do do, I'm broke so this is my theme song. Do do do, just imagine this is an awesome theme song. Do do, theme song. You know what? I'm just going to start from the intro over just a moment. Do do do, theme song. Do do do, I'm broke so this is my theme song. Do do do, just imagine this is an awesome theme song. Do do, theme song. Hello, welcome to Left of the Box. Bonjour, bienvenue. I'm Sandee. It's going to be one of those days. You know, when I do like a pre-recorded video, I actually do the intro like 3 different times and pick the best one. And I don't get that option here, so I'm totally messing it up to begin with. But now I have the mic on, so that's helpful. I adjusted the other screen because I forgot to do that when I was adjusting this one. And I think we're ready to go now. I just want to double check, are people hearing me? I didn't want to have to check. I was thinking I'd come into this nice and smooth this time, but nope. Let's see. Somebody give me a thumbs up for audio. Make sure that it sounds good. Yeah, it's live streaming. Yay! And there's a delay, so this is really, you know, it is what it is. Any thumbs up for audio? Like, it's showing that my audio is working, so I think we're good. And I have the live chat on because for some reason YouTube defaults to top chat, which means that as the chat's going by, you can actually miss out on some of the chats. So, okay, great. Okay, yeah. It's been those days, you know. But I did my hair nice and curly again, and I'm trying something new with my makeup, like adding blush and filling in my eyebrows. Not that you needed to know, but I don't even know if anybody can tell the difference if I put in that much effort. Anyway, so the news, horrible. It's not going to get better anytime soon either. My original plan today was to give updates on Sarah Jama and everything that was happening between her and the NDP. However, nice little surprise announcement, Timur is going to be joining me on Tuesday, if he can get a working webcam, so that we can go over it together. Why Timur? Because him and I tag team calling into Majority Report. That wasn't intentional. I was actually on hold on the phone when Timur got through the first day, and I was like, darn it. But then it was like, oh, well, but actually I'm glad he got through too. So it's, so the next day I called in and I got picked up at that time, and I just built upon what Timur had said. And so I thought, why not the two of us actually do a video about it or a live stream about it and talk about it more, because it's obviously something we're both passionate about. And when I bring people onto my show, I like to talk about things that they have an interest in. And I don't know how long this curl is going to last here before I chew it off. It wasn't so bad before, but I wasn't talking before. And yeah, since my hair is curly and crunchy, I'm going to be playing with it an awful lot. Anyway, so today what I'm going to cover is, like, I know there's breaking news happening with Gaza, and I'm competing with people like Vaj, who has like 100 times more viewers than me. That's more than that. I don't like covering it as it's breaking, unless it's like something fun in the Twitter sphere, because as I will get to in my video, it's hard to trust what is real these days when it comes to the news and just their biases, the mainstream media. But the reality is that's nothing new. And again, I'll get into that more in a little bit. So today, what I have in store for all of you who are watching, thank you very much for coming out, is talking about Canada abstaining from, calling this a genocide, basically. Then I'll get into a little bit about how to be more media savvy when it comes to this sort of thing. Then there's some things about work culture, the 9 to 5, but also to bring the Canadian angle into it, because I like to do that for, reasons. There. Talk about some of the work culture in Canada that I think a lot of Canadians aren't aware of. And probably nobody outside of the country is aware of, because a lot of people outside of the country think that we're some sort of socialist utopia up here. No. And also, I just came across a clip of Candace Owens just talking. She just said something, and that's usually, whenever she talks, it's usually not good, and this was pretty bad. So that's what I have in store for all of you wonderful people today. Again, thank you for coming out. I know times are really tense right now, and it's hard to joke and have a good time, or just even appreciate things like being able to sleep in a comfy bed, because your brain kind of goes over to what's happening in Gaza. And it can be challenging, but what we really need to accept is we can't do anything about the current actions as is, like other than our protests and stuff like that. And while our heart breaks for them, it's important to make sure that we take care of ourselves, so when the time comes that there is things that we can do them at full energy. That's my, do what you can when you can. Because if the opportunity comes for us to get into those protests, to start campaigns with our elected officials and stuff like that, we want to be able to do it with all of our might to make it the most effective. But yeah, it's hard not to think about what's happening over there. But again, it's there's nothing we can do to stop it at this time, and that's really sad. But we are aware of it, and yeah, when the opportunity comes, we need to do whatever we can to make our voices heard, to let people know that this is not okay. And part of it is just getting informed. The other phrase I like, get informed, get involved. This is a little different. And again, I'll get into this more with the media savvy part, where we're actually aware of what's happening. We can see actual footage from the area, from people through Twitter and Instagram. So, we're seeing it secondhand as to the horrors that are happening there. And if you're human, it's hard not for that to hurt. So I want to start off by not saying so often. I'm trying to catch myself on these little verbal tics before they become habit. So is a problem. I find I don't say like too much, and I still try to cut it back when I notice that I am. Yeah, I'm trying to do the impossible of no verbal tics at all. I'll just play with my hair instead. Okay, so we'll start. Okay, we'll start with Uh, something. Let's go to my news share. And hopefully, yep, everything is still, all the bars are working. So this here is Mike Morris. We'll just go here. He is a member of parliament for Kitchener Centre. He is one of the good Green, like he's part of the Green Party. He's one of the better politicians out there. He got elected not because he's with the Green Party, but because he really related well to his community. He did the work, and he's overall a good guy. He is so good that if he was part of the NDP, they would have kicked him out by now. So he had something to say about Canada.
Strip is currently, Mr. Speaker, the Gaza Strip is currently being pounded by unprecedented airstrikes, 400 yesterday alone. Nearly 2/3 of Gaza's hospitals aren't functioning, with the remaining running out of power while needed fuel is blocked. In just 2.5 weeks, almost 8,000 Israeli and Palestinian civilians have been killed, including more than 2,700 Palestinian kids. How many more children need to die until this government's going to call for a ceasefire?
Yeah, we need more politicians like that. One of the advantages that Mike has is he doesn't have to worry about towing the line so much. The Green Party isn't so strict on that sort of thing, which is good and bad, because the Green Party overall is not necessarily good on this. One of the former leaders was actually quite bad on this. So it can be good and bad, but it's always beneficial to have somebody like him in Parliament challenging the Prime Minister on this. I have a couple other videos about Mike back when he first got elected. Plus, he came onto my show because, again, he's a really good guy, and he's trying his best with the very limited power he has. But Justin Trudeau, since this is in the House, he got to respond to this, and I don't think anyone will be surprised if you know anything about Justin Trudeau.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, we unequivocally condemn Hamas's terrorist attack against Israel, and we support Israel's right to defend itself in accordance with international law.
The right to defend themselves when it comes to Israel, again, now is just plain out coded language. They're allowed to do whatever they want, and we won't interfere. In fact, we'll help them. That is pretty much what that has become.
Of course, we are deeply concerned with the situation in Gaza, and as I said, there are ongoing diplomatic conversations about consideration of humanitarian pauses, which is something that Canada supports.
Humanitarian pauses? Like, what? So not a ceasefire, just humanitarian pauses so that we can get into Gaza, give them a cup of water, help them gain some energy back before the bombardment continues. Like, I don't even know what to say to that, really. Humanitarian pauses. That's what Canada is calling for.
Desperately needed humanitarian aid must reach vulnerable Palestinian civilians at risk in Gaza, and Canada is closely engaged with partners to build a humanitarian corridor. Hamas must release hostages, and we have to get foreign nationals, particularly Canadians, safely out of Gaza.
Yeah, let's protect the Canadians that are in Gaza. Let's get them out, but not all the other innocent civilians that are in Gaza. And, Hamas has to release all of their hostages that Israel is more responsible for when it comes to them not making it. Not to mention, Israel also has thousands of Palestinians behind bars for no real reason other than they were Palestinian, and wrong place, wrong time. This country, again, most people don't realize how bad Canada is when it comes to genocide, because most people from the outside see Canada as an ideal place, as, we've merged cultures with the Indigenous peoples, we embrace our our Quebecer French speaking people instead of, plowing over them and all that sort of stuff. But this country has a very, very dark past with multiple genocides, ongoing genocides, supporting genocides, and looking the other way when genocide is happening. And that is most of these colonial countries that we live in, because that is how they got the power that they currently have, is by doing all of this. Really just disgusting attitude. Like, to me, Justin Trudeau has always been very pompous, very arrogant, and, he has a lot of entitlement and stuff because his privilege. His father being prime minister and the wealth that brought and his upbringing and everything. Like, I would prefer it if nobody with that level of privilege made it into government, because there's no way they can possibly understand the struggles of regular people. But the only way to get power in government is to have privilege. So it's the whole system just needs to go. I'd be fine. I'm one of the people, when some people ask, like, oh, do you want Indigenous peoples to take land back and then, like, break up Canada and all this sort of stuff? I'm like, sure. I don't care. I don't care if the country I call Canada gets split up, because I am grateful to be Canadian, but my privilege as being white has led to some advantages here. But since I'm also living with a disability and living with poverty, it also means I get pretty horrible treatment here. Even then, I'm still aware outside this country, it could be a lot worse. So I'm grateful for the privilege I have of living here, but I can't say I'm proud to be Canadian. I haven't been proud of being Canadian for a long, long time. I'm just going to quickly check the chat. Welcome, everyone. Rachel, Christy, Soul Life, thank you everyone for coming out. Rachel's asking, how widespread in Canada is the rumor that he's actually Castro? I think the right wing in the States plays up to that more. Most Canadians that are engaged in politics, I think, are somewhat aware of it, but we find it so ridiculous we don't play into it because he's so not. But the right likes to fearmonger and with that sort of thing. So I think in the United States they play it up a lot more than we do here. And Rachel also says, I still think he can be pushed to supporting a ceasefire though, which could open the floodgates for other North American leaders. Yeah, it's possible. It's just, we have to keep in mind, part of the reason why Canada is reluctant is, as with the States, we sell a lot of weapons to Israel. We send a lot of money to Israel, and they don't want to give up that money. They don't want to give up those sales. So he's going to be reluctant, but I think if he gets enough pressure, when the horrors, like the horrors are already unbearable, he might soften a bit. Like even him saying a humanitarian pause is better, but he's still only condemning Hamas. He isn't saying anything about the actions of Israel other than they have a right to defend themselves. And we don't have time for baby steps. Hunger Games, same. I haven't been proud to be an American for a while. Yeah. I think once we start learning about what our countries are, it's harder to be like, yay, this is great. What we were taught of this country growing up versus what it actually is are two very, very different things. Christy I said Z instead of Z because I'm in Canada. I'm from the US. I know what Israel has been doing to the Palestinians. Biden, his White House, make me sick with their stance on this. If you're against ceasefire, if you're against a ceasefire, you're a monster. Yeah. Yeah. No, you need to be against a ceasefire at this point because it's bad. So we'll get to kitty on my lap. So the UN General Assembly adopts resolution on protection of civilians and upholding legal and humanitarian obligations on the ongoing crisis, Gaza crisis. So you have 124, 14 against, abstain 45. And guess where Canada is? Like, I guess at least they didn't vote against it. There's that. But they did abstain. Oh, look, Tyler, you're like at the top of my replies here. Unfortunately, not surprised about the US. Yeah, can't say I'm surprised either. Let's just go over some of these. So, abstention, Albania, Australia. Here's Canada. Lots of countries most people in North America have never heard of. United Kingdom, Serbia, Netherlands, a lot of, you might be seeing a bit of a trend, a lot of colonial type countries abstained, but the people who voted against this, Austria, Fiji, Hungary, where was the United States on this? Did they? Yeah, they outright voted against it. Yeah, that seems in line with what I know about them. So, UN General Assembly adopts Gaza resolution calling for immediate and sustained humanitarian truce. Now, there's something interesting in this because Canada abstained, but before we abstained, we tried to make this something it's not. Let's go down here. An amendment proposed by Canada and backed by over 35 member states, including the US, seeking an explicit condemnation of Hamas did not pass, failing to get 2/3 support. Yeah, so in that, Canada, we tried to water it down and say, you know what, maybe we'll be more likely to vote for this resolution if it's just an outright saying we're against Hamas. But again, what Israel is doing, we don't have anything to say about that. But we need to say Hamas is bad before everything. Do you condemn Hamas? Start that off with everything they say. It's just, you know, we have other countries out there asking for de-escalation, asking for peace. And here's Canada saying, no, we just want to condemn Hamas. There was a very powerful speech about that from the Pakistan ambassador.
That if one were to see the situation that is on the ground with Israeli bombs that are there for 20 days against the helpless Palestinian people, with 7,000 men, women, and small children, half of them children, killed by Israel in the last 20 days. 17,000 injured. 1.1 million Palestinians displaced. The enormity of the crimes that are being committed by Israel against the Palestinian people are so great and enormous that it is amazing that when my friend from Canada insists on naming the organization Hamas, that he does not feel the need for the equity and balance and fairness for which Canada is so well known. He does not feel the need to name Israel for killing 7,000 Palestinians and injuring 17,000. only Hamas. Is this balance? He says what needs to be named has to be named. We believe Israel needs to be named. If you are fair, if you are equitable, if you are just, you will not blame one side and not the other. And if you were to go back to the issue of who started this, we all know who started this. It is a 50 years of Israeli occupation and the murder and killing of Palestinians with impunity that started this. When you push a people into the corner, they will respond. This is what the Secretary General said. It did not happen in a vacuum. And look at the reaction that came from the Israeli representative, insulting the Secretary General, calling for his resignation. They can't face the truth. They can't face justice. They can't face the fact that the crime has originated with the Israelis. The Israeli occupation is the original sin in this case. It is not what happened on the 7th of October. That is a proximate cause. But the real cause is the occupation of Palestine.
Damn. Just, he absolutely nailed it. And I'm ashamed that Canada isn't saying this, that we have to be told this by another country. That the veneer of what Canada is finally wearing off because other countries are finally seeing what we actually stand for, what we have always stood for. Canada won't call out this type of behavior when it's exactly what we did before. Like, again, I've said that it's not exactly apples to apples, as in it's not a Macintosh, it's more like a Macintosh apple to a Honeycrisp apple comparison as to what Canada did to the Indigenous peoples. And that's only because the histories are different, the time frames are different. But what the countries are doing, the tactics, it's all the same. Canada is guilty of doing everything Israel is doing now, except we weren't bombing because that wasn't really, we didn't really have that. But the starvation, forcing people off their land, indiscriminate killing, all of that Canada is guilty of. And I'm glad other countries are calling us out. I'm glad that they're trying to hold us accountable, because the few voices within Canada trying to get us held accountable for everything we did were not being heard. A lot of the time, the only reason why Canada will react is if we get called out by other countries, when it starts to become a bit of an embarrassment. But what the Pakistan ambassador had to say was just so spot on. Like, just completely. And I don't understand how people don't see it that way when they're still saying that Israel has a right to defend itself, despite everything that we've been seeing. I don't understand how the deaths of 7,000 plus people by Israel is anything other than horrific genocide. Let's see. And then we have a statement from Canada for Justice and Peace in the Middle East. Canada failed humanity by abstaining on the UNGA emergency resolution for humanitarian truce in Gaza. Our country is officially complacent and complicit with the terrible humanitarian catastrophe which UN experts and scholars warn may amount to genocide. And they have a statement about that. It's a fair bit. It's long. Yeah, I'm ashamed of Canada that we aren't doing more. That the illusion was, when I was a child anyway, that Canada would be at the forefront of supporting Palestinians. We were the peacekeepers. We were, the ones going around the world helping each other out and supporting them. And even our stance when it came to like the Rwanda genocide, some of the things that Canadians did in that to, fight back, to call it out and stuff like that, was far more forceful than anything we're seeing now. Even though it's so, again, clear as day as to what's happening, we have the footage. We have the firsthand accounts of what's happening over there. And it is just so shameful to be in this. Canada isn't at threat of this happening here because we're isolated. Our neighbors are the states. So unless they want to invade, which I don't rule it out completely, we're safe. We're not going to see this type of brutality happen here. And so it's easy for all these privileged politicians to sit up in their golden chairs saying, oh, well, Israel has the right to defend himself, when they're not over there. They're not the ones being harmed by this. And the few politicians that actually have family over there that are being hurt and killed and all that sort of stuff, they're being shut down. Because just like the States, if you support Palestinians over here, you can lose jobs, you can get doxxed, all of that horrible stuff happens here as well. Let's see if there's anything. Like, this isn't going to make Israel safer. It's going to make them it's going to make it worse for them as well, because as somebody said, if somebody killed all my family and Hamas and everything and killed all my family, all it would do is make Hamas too. So Public Utility First Nations of Canada won a lawsuit many years ago, awarded some billions of dollars, and they will never get pay, and the world powers didn't care. Yeah, that's one of my pet peeves about this country, is we will announce really good sounding headlines like, oh, Indigenous peoples won a lawsuit, or, this amazing thing is going to happen. And then what you don't hear is the fact that the Canadian government will appeal it or just flat out refuse to pay. That happens. But you don't hear that. You only hear the good headline. So the anti-corporatist, in my opinion, having the right to defend yourself does not translate to having the right to murder a bunch of unarmed kids and non-combat. It's back to bombing the bank analogy. Yeah, if I'm under threat from somebody trying to break into my house, I don't get to then murder their entire family. That's not how it works. And a lot of people have said, like, so what do? Like, you have special forces go in and root out Hamas and stuff. But it falls back to that other thing that I was saying. Unless the conditions are taken away which created Hamas in the first place, you will never be able to root out Hamas. Something new will just spring into place. And as people have pointed out in the West Bank, they're also being treated horribly, and it's not going reported right now, mainstream. But I've been seeing the accounts of an uptick in violence in the West Bank against Palestinians there. So even without Hamas, they're still being treated horribly. Like, really, the occupation needs to end. If you want to get rid of the violence, the occupation needs to end, because the occupation is violence. And people who are saying that justifies the actions of Hamas, no, it doesn't, because that sort of attacking civilians, no matter what side you're on, is wrong. Like, it's wrong. And what Hamas did in their violent actions is far-reaching consequences in Gaza over that. it didn't, yeah, like, I don't even know what they were hoping for with that attack. Like, what they thought it would make Israel crumble under the pressure or something. No, there was no good outcome was going to come from that attack. I wish I was a little bit more coherent on this. Like, I have all these brilliant thoughts in my head, but then I try to communicate them out. And this is why I like to write out my scripts a lot of the time, so that I can have the best language possible to say this, because a lot can be misinterpreted. Like, even when people say, you know, they understand why Hamas did what they did, it sounds like you support it when you don't. But, you know, every other method for the Palestinians to fight back has been taken away. BDS is actually banned in some states, and I don't know if it's outright banned in Canada, but you will lose jobs if you publicly support it. Just, you know, they've had peaceful protests. There was the March on the Wall, where it was just peaceful, going up to the wall to try to protest their situation, and many of them were just shot and killed for just being there. Like, you've taken away every other method for them to fight back. So is it surprising that the only method left is this violence, and it gets perpetrated because some people feel so desperate to do anything that they do it in a way that will actually harm themselves? Hunger Games 1989. How about the bodies found on Indigenous schools that Canada denied for years? And after the bodies were found, Trudeau came out and made a big speech on how sad he was while fighting the lawsuit. Yeah, very true. And I've pointed this out in videos before, but how far exactly do you think Trudeau would go in calling out what happened at residential schools when his dad was prime minister while there were still residential schools? Because to try to hold Canada accountable for their actions with that would mean his dad's name might get tarnished. His family name might get tarnished because his father is partially responsible for what was happening. So we're not going to get any accountability as long as Justin Trudeau is in power. The anti-corporatist, the best exclamation I have heard at Sign is that they were looking to take hostages in exchange for prisoners. Actually, the casual is really rose when IDF got there. Okay, I think, yeah, they were hoping to get hostages in order to exchange for the prisoners or something of that sort. I could see that, sort of, but they had to know. They had to know what would have happened, what was going to happen. I find it hard to believe that they weren't aware that Israel would just use this as an excuse. Soul Life. Hassan watched a video of them interviewing random Israelis about Hamas, and not one person had a good or realistic take. Arabs aren't from here. It's our land. We conquered it. I do believe that there are plenty of Israelis who say that, but you have to also keep in mind that those videos are skewed, and this is part of the media biases. They're only going to report the ones where the worst takes possible from Israelis were done, whereas there might have been Israelis with completely reasonable takes on it, but they weren't included in that montage because that's not what the media company that put that together wanted to portray out there. Because we do know that there are Jewish people in Israel who are pushing back against their government, who sees what they're doing as being horrible. We just don't hear much about that. So part of the media skewing and biases, let's go back to this. So we have here, I said so again, didn't I? Gosh darn it, I'm trying not to do that. I don't know. I don't think I'll be able to get rid of all my verbal tics. That's the level of perfection that I want, that I don't think anyone can really achieve. Not live anyway. An English message from an Arabic-speaking population whose communications you've already cut off is how you know this propaganda is for Western audiences. And yeah.
An urgent military advisory from the Israel Defense. Attention, citizens of Gaza, listen carefully. This is an urgent military advisory from the Israel Defense Forces.
So yeah, he's addressing the people in Gaza with this on what device? When the internet and electricity have been cut off? Like, how are they supposed to hear this? It's kind of like when you see people mock the stars, the superstars, the celebrities who are saying, we call upon the government to blah, blah, blah. And it's like, do you really think you're communicating to the people that can make a difference or that they care? Like, this is, again, this is part of trying to make Israel look good. Like, oh, we're doing our part. We're telling them all this stuff, but they're the ones not cooperating. And it doesn't matter that none of them are going to see this message.
For your immediate safety, we urge all residents of northern Gaza and Gaza City to temporarily relocate south.
Temporarily? Temporarily. Just relocate to the south so we can level all of the buildings in the north, and sure, then you'll be able to go back. No, I don't think Israel has any plans on letting them go back to the wasteland that they're creating. And even if they did, how are they supposed to live there when their entire infrastructure has been destroyed?
Let me repeat. We urge all residents of northern Gaza and Gaza City to relocate south immediately. This is a temporary measure. Moving back to northern Gaza will be possible once the intense hostilities end. Hamas
No. Absolutely no.
puts your life in danger by placing weapons and forces within civilians' area in Gaza, including schools, mosques, and hospitals. The impending IDF operation is set to neutralize these threats of Hamas with precision and intensity. Humanity remains haunted by the massacre unleashed by Hamas on October 7th.
I get the feeling that all the sympathy people had, like, it's... People are no longer going to be haunted by the actions of the 7th when what Israel's doing is kind of taking the focus away. Like, what they're doing is... Like, I don't like comparing tragedies, but if they wanted people to focus more on what happened on the 7th, maybe not kill thousands upon thousands more. It is just... And they want them to move so they can root out Hamas. Like, Hamas wouldn't move with the population or anything of that sort. Like, it's just, the whole thing is ridiculous. They just want to relocate the population. They're never going to be allowed back, not as things are.
A massacre of innocent lives. Israeli men, women, children, and babies were beheaded, executed, raped, and burnt alive.
That has been debunked. I'll get more into that in a moment.
We won't forget that. And the kidnapping of over 200 Israelis, we will not forget.
many of which Israel has already killed.
To the residents of northern Gaza and Gaza City, your window to act is closing. Move south. For your own safety, move
So we can bomb the routes as you're moving south.
south. This is not a mere precaution. It is an urgent plea for the safety of the civilians in Gaza.
If you want the civilians of Gaza to be safe, don't bomb them. Don't cut off their water, don't cut off their electricity. If you want the citizens to live, that you don't do that. So this is just manipulation to Western eyes, to try to make Israel look like the good guys. And before, they probably could have gotten away with it. Because a lot of people are saying right now, like, mainstream media is wrong on all of this stuff. Like, and this is part of the reason why we can't trust mainstream media right now, is that they take some of these and they just go with it. And they're corrupt and they do all this stuff. And the thing is, it's always been that way. We just didn't know before. We were only ever seeing the one side. But this has always been the case with mainstream media. Go back as far as you want. And this has always been the case. We just can see the other side now because of so many people with cell phones and video and firsthand accounts, plus, people over here with relatives over there, friends and family over there. We're finally seeing the media for what they are, and it's just propaganda. Propaganda for the governments, for the status quo. And because, you go back 20 years, this message, that's all some Westerners would see, without knowing that there was no way for this message to get to the people in Gaza to even begin with. Or the fact that it's done in English when many people in Gaza don't speak English. So what use is this to them exactly? And that's because it wasn't made for them. It was made for the Western audience. What the person who tweeted it out said. And so here we get into how some of this news about Gaza has been, the fog of war and everything, and why I don't like necessarily covering things as they're breaking, because it's so hard to know what is true. And from Ryan Grimm, he says, holy shit, looks like the Western media mistranslated a doctor's guess that there were more than 500 killed or wounded by the hospital bombing and just went with killed. That's a pretty big mistake. You see, when I first heard that 500 number, my actual assumption was somebody on the ground when it happened there, just out of exasperation or shock, just said, oh my God, I think like 500 people are dead, without actually knowing. And that somebody else overheard that and just went with it. Because that is basically how that story about the 40 beheaded babies happened, was somebody just heard somebody say it and went with it. And that's what I thought happened. But it turns out, no, it was an actual mistranslation. So they were saying that there were 500 killed or wounded. And the press just went with 500 killed. So then the press found that fewer than 500 were killed, and the President of the United States told the world the numbers from the health ministry can't be trusted. It can't be trusted because of a mistake in communication. Astounding combination of arrogance and ignorance in the service of unchecked slaughter. Yeah, just... Again, this is part of the reason why we can't trust the media anymore, is that they're not doing their own fact checks. Nobody's going back to the original source to be like, okay, what happened there? Why don't we watch it for ourselves and see what happened? And nobody is just putting any thought into it. They hear something and they go with it. Like for me, the thing about the 40 babies that stuck out, and did it happen to some? Sure, maybe, probably. So I'm not a fan of children and babies. So I honestly don't know how many babies are in the population, like percentage wise. Because I know when I go to the mall, when I go to events where there are thousands upon thousands of people, I don't see 40 babies. Like, how much land do they have to cover? Like, is there even that many babies in the baby ward in a hospital? Like, where did that number come from? Like, to me, that is what stuck out to me, is like how far ground they would have had to cover, considering that also a large percentage of the people killed were at the music festival, which skewed in age. Like, there would be no babies there to begin with. And it's just having that moment to think, was what I just heard true? And in the immediate aftermath of a bombing, to say suddenly 500 people are dead, just stop and take a moment and think to yourself, is that number true? Like, how much time has passed? How could that be counted so fast when, there's no way of knowing how many people are there to begin with, because a lot of people are just there sheltering. There's no list of people who they can then account for. Like, there wasn't enough time passed to know how many have died. But also things to take into consideration, the number 7,000, I believe it's more than 7,000 now. That number is also extremely skewed in the other way, because there are most likely thousands of people under the rubble that haven't been accounted for, because all the people that would say that they were dead are also dead with them. Like, entire families. There's no one to report them missing. There's nobody is there to be able to dig them out from under. So that number is far, far lower than what the actual count is. And it is horrifying. Just completely horrifying. And then this news article came out. Thousands loot UN aid warehouse in Gaza as death toll tops 8,000 and Israel widens ground offensive. That's quite the headline. Making it sound like, they're vandalizing the UN warehouse versus they are desperate for food and water. Somebody on Twitter was pointing out that back when Katrina happened, when Black people were going to get supplies, breaking into places to get supplies, they were looting. But when white people were doing it, then they were just doing what they needed to survive. And this, again, is trying to skew the narrative, trying to make it sound like the people in Gaza are uncontrollable and they're doing all these horrible things. They broke into the warehouse and they're stealing supplies from what? From other people who would need it? They're the ones who need it. This is just garbage headlines coming out from mainstream media. And this is far from the only ones where you have, when the media talks about the death toll in Gaza, it's like this many people died versus, the death toll in Israel. These many people were killed by Palestinians. Like, it is those subtle things, but it skews the narrative. And again, before, this is all we were hearing. And so it was easy to believe what we were hearing because we're supposed to be able to trust the news. Like, that's the whole point, to learn about what's happening in the world. But it's never been that way. Sadly, we're all learning as we go along that the media has never been on the side of truth. Yeah, Chrissy said, everyone needs to stop with that beheaded baby narrative. Never happened and only food for right wing. Yeah, no, it never happened. Like, logically, it never happened. The idea that all these people were being raped beside the murdered bodies also, again, logically didn't happen because, time. Like, it's horrible to have to think like that, but yeah, they weren't there to do that. And do I think all of the hostages being held are being treated well? No, I don't. There's that story out again of a couple older women who were in their 80s who Hamas released. And these women were they shook their hands. They said that they were treated very well, that everything was good, that they were given all the care that they needed. However, their husbands are still being held. So I would take whatever they say with a big grain of salt. It is possible Hamas treated them well, but it's also possible they have to say that to keep their husbands safe. Again, this is why it's so difficult to report on things as they're happening, because there's no way to know what's true. But I'm sure a lot of the hostages are being treated poorly. Some of them might be treated well. I don't know. There's no way of knowing. Just like for all the Palestinians in prison in Israel, a lot of them are being treated horribly. I would say almost none of, I would hazard to guess none of them are being treated well. Let's see. Just checking. Hello, MIDI doctors. Thank you for popping in. It's hard to read comments because I don't know which ones are part of conversations or stuff, because I just see a bunch of ha 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 ha. And it's like, I don't think what I said is funny. So there's that. It's weird trying to follow chat and do this at the same time. But yeah, like with the media, it's been debunked. Some of the videos that we've been seeing aren't from actual footage of the fighting that's going on and everything. So it's so hard to kind of keep on top of all of this. Anti-corporatists, given that we have the largest prison population in the world, we here in the US don't have a lot of wiggle room when criticizing other people's treatment of prisoners, Yeah, because people who go to prison don't go there to get better. And that's part of, I'm all for abolishing the prison system as we know it. I'm all for restorative justice because we don't want people coming out of that system more broken than when they went in. This is terrible stand-up comedy, Sandee. Yeah, it would be terrible stand-up comedy if this is what this was. Matt Binder, Pinkerbell saying, oh, hi, Pinkerbell, saying Matt Binder has been on that beat. Sure. I don't know which beat that is. Prison reform. Yeah. MIDI doctors, people get into these comparison arguments, which is dumb, in my opinion. They are. As someone who has been through a lot in my life, a lot of traumas and stuff like that, you often get into those things with other people where I try to talk about my traumas, but then somebody will chime in saying, oh, but here, let's move to the main shot for this little. So I'll try to talk about my trauma, but then somebody else near me will be like, oh, but I've been through this and this and this, almost like it's trying to invalidate everything that I went through. And it's like, no, I'm just trying to talk about my experience and how that affected me. But so often people are like, well, almost like you don't deserve any kindness, any sympathy, any validation, because there's people out there who have had it far worse than you. And that helps no one. It keeps people quiet. Like, why would anyone want to share their experiences if they're just going to get shot down? Because it takes a lot of vulnerability to talk about certain experiences. And it's important that people do, because for one thing, it helps them get it out of their system so it's not all pent up. But then it lets other people know they're not alone, that they're not the only one who might have gone through certain situations. So it's important that people talk, and when they get shut down because somebody else is like, well, you didn't have it that bad because there's other people. It's like, no, it doesn't detract. Like, just because relatively speaking, it might not be as bad, it doesn't mean that it wasn't bad. And this goes into something that I've been working on in the back of my mind, something I plan on doing in a video soon, is talking about the challenges of having empathy for people who seem to have it far better than you. Because there's a lot of people in the right wing in particular where I see people on the left don't want to give them any slack, don't want to have any empathy for them. But there are things that happened in their life that are also bad. And empathy also isn't mean that you have to feel sorry for them or anything of that sort. Like, it literally just means to try to understand where they're coming from, to try to put yourself in that situation. And it can be hard to have empathy for somebody who seems to have had it really good, but from their perspective, their bubble, things are getting worse. Like, wealthy, there's some people in the townships around me who are conservative, like in farm country and land, and they have houses and stuff, but things have been getting harder for them, more challenging. They're having to budget more. They can't get as much. They're losing a lot of their ways of life. And it's easy for somebody who is unhoused in the city to say, oh, poor them. But you have to understand that they're also in pain from a lot of the same systems that put that unhoused person in the situation that they're in. It is like trying to compare what happened in Israel to what is happening in Gaza. It's like they're both horrible. But what is happening right now is happening in Gaza. That's why the focus should be there, because that's happening now. Yeah, it is just... Donald James, why do you think Yahoo's approval rating's low? Because Israel think he's wrong for genocide, or because IDF are incompetent? Oh, okay, Netanyahu. Okay, got ya. Why his approval ratings were low before all of this attack and stuff. Part of... There's a lot of talk, and again, fog of war, I don't know that Israel knew an attack was coming. They might not have known how bad it was, but they knew it was coming. They let their guard down because this sort of thing could potentially help approval ratings, but I think it's going to backfire spectacularly because there's a lot of corruption and things going on there. And, you know, it's not the horrendous treatment of the people in Gaza that is going to lower widespread approval with him. It's going to be the corruption and all the things that he's doing to the population there that will do that, because the people who already disapproved of him because of the treatment of Palestinians, they were already disapproving of him, but the people who weren't, it's because they don't care. And so they only care when it starts to affect them. Public utility for the victims is bad enough regardless of any comparison. It's not a competition. Yeah. Who wants to win that competition? I mean, nobody. Like, I wish I wasn't in the running. It's not a competition as to who had it worse. It never has been. Not personally, not when it comes to cultures, nothing. Because they all need to be, they all have their own unique set of variables that need to be examined. And I wish none of it was happening. None of this horror was happening. Many doctors, they let their guard down. Theories are utter bollocks. Yeah, it could be. I don't know. I've heard so many competing things out there as to how this happened. Like something about USA having a base near there that was focused on something else, or it's just... We won't know until well over all of this happened. How much Netanyahu knew, how much Israel did or didn't do, the exact extent of what happened, because the body count in Israel has been fluctuating drastically, even though there's no new attacks there. It's been fluctuating so much. We won't know all the details. All we know right now is what we can see, and what we can actually see through video and stuff is what's happening in Gaza is wrong. Like, it's wrong. The amount of lives being lost there is wrong. And it is genocide at this point. You can't, how can you say it's not? This isn't, self-defense at this point. Dr. Donald James, does anyone know Hamas's approval rating with Palestinians? I don't think that's a known number, a known quantity, and it would depend on the question and how you're asking, because a lot of the social services and stuff that they have in Gaza is implemented through Hamas, and so that might have a high approval rating, but the crossing border to murder people would have a really low approval rating. Like it would be hard to gather that type of information in any way that would reflect, because you can approve a group for some things they do, but then disapprove for other things they do. It's, yeah. Okay, let's... There was another thing about Israel I was going to get to, but I think it's enough bad for now. There's enough bad. We don't need to add on to it anymore. So why don't we shift subjects here? Because sadly, this one isn't going to go away anytime soon. Cat K, Christy, hugs to you. I'm sorry you had to go through that. I'm sorry too. I don't know what it is, but it was a long time ago. I was just making a point. Okay, well, I'm sorry to know something bad happened. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's hard to follow chat. But thank you again for everyone who's coming out. These first bunch of live streams I'm doing, they're not going to be that great. They're going to be incoherent as I'm trying to figure out how to get my words across. Like, Thursday I did a public speaking engagement. And the thing is if you get me on stage in front of an audience with a mic in my face, magically all the words come together. I'm still struggling to do it here. So yeah, let's switch subjects. And this is part of the work culture going on. And this, I came across this video on Twitter. Yeah, I came across a TikTok video on Twitter. And the person who made this video was getting a lot of hate.
My first job, like my first night. I know I'm probably just being so dramatic and annoying, but this is my first job, like my first 9-to-5 job after college, and I'm in person, and I'm commuting in the city, and it takes me fucking forever to get there. There's no way I'm gonna be able to afford living in the city right now, so that's off the table. Like, fucking duh! If I was able to walk to work, and it'd be fine, but I'm not. So it literally takes me, like, I leave here, like, I get on the train at 7:30, and I don't get home till, like, 6:15 earliest, and then, like, I don't have time to do anything. I want to shower, eat my dinner, and go to sleep. I don't have time or energy to cook my dinner either. Like, I don't have energy to work out. Like, that's out the window. Like, I'm so upset. Oh my god. Nothing to do with my job at all, but just, like, the 9-to-5 schedule in general is crazy. Being in the office 9 to 5, like, if it was remote, you get off at 5, and you're home, and everything's fine. But, like, I'm not home. It takes me long to get home, and, like, people that drive to the office, like, you don't get off at 5, and I know it could be worse, I know I could be working longer, but, like, I literally get off, it's pitch black, like, I don't have energy. How do you have friends? Like, how do you have time to, like, meet, like, a guy. I don't know. Like, how do you have time for, like, dating? Like, I don't have time for anything, and I'm, like, so stressed out. And I'm also getting my period, so that's why I'm all emotional. But, like, am I so dramatic? It's fine.
And the poster saying, Gen Z girl finds out what a real job is like. Why do we have to accept that is a real job? Like, a lot of people were mocking her because it's like, oh, well, this is just work. But everything she said was completely valid. What is the point to living if all you do is you go to work and you come home with not even enough time to fully even rest up from the previous work day before you have to go back in? Where you have no social life, no time for yourself, no time to pursue hobbies, no time to pursue relationships, like family units. How do you properly raise your children when you don't have time? Like, it is sick that this is just considered normal, and if you can't do it, you're considered weak, versus if you speak out about it, you're just acknowledging why it's so absurd that we've settled. Because there are certain jobs that I could have done if I was physically able to. You know, a simple factory job. You go in, you push buttons, and then when you leave, you leave. And if it's close to your home and it's not taking too much time and it's not straining you outside of work hours, then those I find are far more manageable. But then you get into these office jobs where you have to commute and in traffic and that can add an extra 2 hours to your day. And then when you get home, you don't have time for anything, or you might have work emails and they're constantly demanding more and more of you when it's not necessary. Like, the idea of a 9-to-5 job, in most offices I've worked in, I never worked 9 to 5 while I was in there. I worked for 3 hours and pretended to look busy the rest of the time. Not because I wasn't doing my job, but because I finished everything I needed to do. And so that's time that I could have spent enriching my life. Like, we're supposed to be working to support our lives, to have a life, to go out there and do things. And so this is, again, in that whole, like, oppression Olympics thing. Like, how dare she talk about how bad she has it when there's all these other people? And it's like, no, what she is feeling is completely valid, especially when you're single and you want to have a relationship. Somebody like her who might be wanting to start a family someday and realizing that with the current work culture, that's not going to happen. Because, yeah, how do you meet people, have friends, hold down friendships? You try to date someone, but you're lucky if you can go on a date every other week or something of that sort. Because the time, or just wanting to unwind and decompress, like, a lot of my stress with office jobs came in from the fact that the weekends would come. And by the time I finished unwinding from the work week, it was Sunday at like 6 o'clock in the evening. Like, we've settled for, well, a lot of us haven't settled, but this is what they want. This is what, the capitalist system wants, is to exploit us as much as possible. And then to make it seem like that's normal, that it's okay, that this is the way it should be, that, anything you have on the side could be time used working to make more money. But what's the point of having more money if you don't have anything to spend it on worthwhile? And not to mention that most of the money these days is just going towards rent, to the cost of living. It's not going towards savings, vacations, things that you might enjoy in life. She's probably looking at the fact that if things stay the way they are, she's going to get to be like 30 or something and look back in her life and realize there were no good moments, no good memories. Like, where are the good memories? The time she spent with friends, the stories, learning about the community, going on a vacation, all the things that when you get into older years that you like to fondly look back on. So what happens when you get to that age and realize that there is nothing to look fondly on? That all that time was spent making money for a corporation that didn't care about you. Like, this is toxic. The whole, our society has baggage. And this doesn't lead to a better society. It doesn't lead to better relationships, better families when we're forced, because that's the thing, we're forced to live in this system the way it is. And the people, usually people who have settled, people who succeeded in the system, then mock people for not being able to cope with it because, it benefits them somehow. It keeps their employees in line when it's like, well, it could be a lot worse. You might not have this job. And I think a lot of this too is people waking up after COVID. Because during COVID, when a lot of things were shut down and people actually got to experience what it was like to be able to sit down and have a conversation with someone, to spend time with friends and family, and then to have that suddenly be taken away again. I don't think many people will put up with it so much this time, and that's good. Because the way technology is, the way automation is, we should be closer to that Star Trek future at this point. Instead, companies are just trying to find ways to exploit us more and more and more. Most people don't need to go into the office for 8 hours a day, not to do the jobs that they need to do. Most people can work from home and then still maintain some sort of family life. It is, trying to keep people broken so that they don't fight back, so that they don't stand up for themselves. So life, I'm hourly. My day starts at 9 a.m., but my boss has the crew text me at 8 a.m. for info I already told them via daily email the night before. Then if I don't text back fast enough, he bitches about it. Oh, bitches about it. Okay. Yeah. There's all this expectation now that you need to be devoted to your job 24/7, that you should drop everything when needed to answer an email or a text or to do all of this sort of stuff. I had a very interesting thought and it just left my head. Oh, right. Yeah. No. Part of the reason why I can't get past an interview. Being autistic, I tend to be a little bit honest. And when they ask you the question, so why do you want to work for us? And my answer being, well, I can do all the things you're asking. You're close by and you pay. They don't like that answer. They don't. They're worried because I don't, fawn over the company. Like, oh my gosh, I've always wanted to work in a Tim Hortons kitchen. Like, this is the job that I've dreamed to have my entire life. Like, there's absolutely nothing wrong with having a job at Tim Hortons. And for some people, it pays the bill. Great on them. But I don't think there's too many people who are kids thinking that's what I want to be when I grow up. It's a job. That's all it is. But we're supposed to fawn over companies and corporations like they are the saviors of the land because they offer us this wealth of opportunity when they don't. It's just... And yeah, I've had jobs that I've had to commute long hours to. For what? You get there, you do your work, you don't necessarily get to socialize. Well, lots of my coworkers would socialize, but I don't do office politics well. I don't know how that works. I don't know how to communicate with a lot of my coworkers, so I never did. And I always found it weird when a lot of people would just sit around talking for hours in a day about stuff versus doing jobs. Because again, we're forced into this 9-to-5 work structure, whereas most jobs, if you just sit down and do your job, most of it is done within a certain amount of time, and the rest of the time is just looking like you're busy. Environmental Coffee House, thank you for coming out. I did. HR people issues. We had offices in Maiden Lane during 9/11. I had to relocate our people. Stress. I was young then. It was nuts. Sounds like it. The anti-corporatist, I'm over that shit. I usually start the interview asking them, okay, so why do I want to work for you? Yeah, I've done things too like that. They don't like it. Or there's this one that I love to say when they say, what's your weakness? And I say, cookie dough ice cream. It's true. They don't like that answer. But when I'm honest and I say boredom, they don't take my word for it. When I say, I need to be kept busy because if I get bored, then I start to not do well at jobs and stuff like that. And most people don't understand how efficient I am at work and how quick I can get everything done. And then I'm left being bored. And then I start not being able to do my job right because I try to distract myself with other things, and I get really pissy when I'm forced to stay at like a desk, a cubicle, and pretend to be doing things for what? And yet they then want to pile on extra work on me that goes above and beyond the job description without paying me more. Looney Tunes. Sandee has painted the picture very well when she got laid off by the Young Turfs. Yeah, sure. I don't know. Yeah, and I'm just catching conversations in bits and pieces here. But what I want to add on to this is just the way companies will exploit you. So, you have this poor young woman here looking at what her life is going to be in this situation. And we have in Canada horrendous conditions for workers that most people don't know about. So now I get to use my little thingy here.
Today in Canadian news.
Yeah, I want to do that because these are going to be Canadian stories. Oh, do I have this in the right order? Yeah, so opinion. Jordan House discussing prison labor in Canada. Now, I know a lot of us have heard about the exploitation of workers in American prisons, but what you probably don't know is it happens here. It is a big problem here, the exploitation of people in prisons for their labor, and just in general. In Ontario, you like your license plates? They were made in a prison. A lot of the things that is made by the government is made by prison labor, and no, they are not getting paid well to do it, and they are being exploited. Let's skip down. I didn't want to read all of this article. Because there's another article I'm going to be reading a lot more from. According to Law and Correctional Policy, prisoners in Canada work as part of their rehabilitation, not as punishment. This labor takes two main forms. The first, institutional maintenance. Prisoners perform the cooking and cleaning, all that sort of stuff in-house. And, they try to say that this is, gives them skills for outside and all that sort of stuff. The problem with prison labor in this country are well known by the government. The Office of Correction Investigator, Canada's federal prison watchdog, routinely admonishes employment programming. In the most recent report, correctional investigator Ivan Zinger highlighted employment and pay discrimination against Black prisoners in particular. The year before, Zinger honed in on, that's an acronym, inadequate programming for women, noting that jobs women are often grounded in gendered roles and expectations, offering few marketable skills. Wage clawbacks. Pay is another significant issue. In 2013, Stephen Harper Conservative government implemented new room and board and other fees that amount to 30% wage clawback and eliminated incentive pay for corn can work. So here's the thing that people don't know is that you have to pay to be in prison. You're not just taken away from society and have all your freedoms taken, you then have to pay to be there through, yeah. So, in announcing the new fees, the government ignored the fact that pay scales for federal prisoners implemented in 1981 had already accounted for room and board deductions. The maximum pay for federal prisoners is $6.90 per day minus mandatory fees. According to this organization, since these changes, the average pay for prisoners working full-time is around 30 cents an hour. Meanwhile, the cost of living in prisons has skyrocketed as more and more expenses, including the cost of basic hygiene items, have been downloaded onto the prisoner. So you have to work in prison for certain programs to get into certain, it looks good on your parole if you do this and all that sort of stuff. But they then take away almost all of your salary to pay for hygiene products, phone calls. We'll get into the phone calls in a moment. Money is also required for letters. Phone calls. Prisoners need to maintain community relationships, which are viewed favorably when parole board makes decisions. What's more, scholars and prisoners themselves have warned that low pay hinders prisoners' ability to successfully reintegrate post-release, like avoiding committing crimes out of financial necessity, which ultimately reduces public safety. Yeah. No labor rights. However, just as they exclude from employment standards and labor laws, prisoners are generally excluded from health and safety laws designed to protect workers. There is no public safety justification, let alone moral one, for the exclusion of working prisoners from normal employment and health and safety protections. There's no reason to curtail prisoners' labor rights. So not only when you go to prison, you have all your freedoms taken away, they then start stripping away your rights, which I personally don't feel like that's okay to do under any circumstance, is to strip away a person's rights because they end up in prison for whatever reason. Like in Canada, prisoners still have the right to vote, things of that sort, the right to, they should still have the right to all medical care and safety precautions that everyone else has. It's ridiculous to think that a lot of people just hit a bad patch in their life and ended up in prison, and to then punish them in ways that isn't going to help them become a better person isn't the solution. A union for prisoners may seem far-fetched, but there is historical precedent. In 1977, provincial prisoners working in privately managed abattoir in Ontario's Guelph Correctional Centre unionized, winning full rights as workers. The union lasted nearly 2 decades before operation was moved off prison grounds as part of a corporate merger. Yeah, that's a thought. Why don't we have unions for prisoners? That would help their conditions so much. But let's get into those phone calls. Ontario, Bell won't say how much money they made from inmate phone calls. So for my American viewers, because there's a lot of American viewers on my channel, apparently, more so than Canadian viewers. When we say Bell, we mean a corporate overlord from hell. They have the Bell Let's Talk Day once a year where they want to talk about mental health and all that sort of stuff while ignoring the extreme mental health issues they cause in their employees. So we have a few telecom giants in Canada, Bell, Rogers, and you switch back and forth between those two. They have a monopoly on the market. And it's hard to get out of it. There's smaller ones that do manage to peek through in different areas, but we don't have choice. We don't have variety when it comes to that sort of thing. And so they get to dictate the terms of everything. It's kind of like when there was Rogers, the other big company when it comes to phone and internet and cable and all that. When they had a blackout for 24 hours, there was no internet connection through Rogers. That shut down society because of all the companies that use them for transactions and things of that sort, like ordering food, because all of the companies rely on it. And since that's almost half or more than half of the population, when one of these companies goes down for any length of time, it shuts down everything. Let's see. How long was this article? Okay, I don't think we want to go through all of it. I'm trying not to just, narrate articles. I want to go through parts of it, but then I'm worried that I'm going to miss the good parts. So Bell operated the offender telephone management system from those dates, which allowed inmates to only place collect calls at flat rate of $1 for local calls, but $1 per minute plus a $2.50 connection fee for long distance calls, according to a recent appeal court decision. Now, the thing about the long distance calls is most prisons, when you call out of them to your communities, that's long distance. As well, the province took commission on the money Bell made from those calls, which the court said numbered about $15,000 a day. So, of course, the province isn't wanting to do anything about it because they make money from this. The government declined to provide the amount collected or explain why collected a commission in response to queries from the Canadian press. Yeah, they didn't want to acknowledge how much they were exploiting prisoners. But it's not just, in this case, it's not just the prisoners that they're exploiting, it's their families and friends. Because it's collect calls only. So it makes me feel sick to my stomach, former inmate Vanessa Furrow said of the profits generated from the phone calls. Most people are calling their loved ones. Their loved ones didn't commit a crime. You know what I mean? And this is who ends up paying for the phone bills, having to go into debt, having to struggle financially. So she is somebody who, so she was incarcerated and on remand for breaches of probation and needed to make calls to arrange childcare and keep in touch with her kids. She alleges her calls were subject to long distance rates as she lived in Quebec, side of the National Capital Region. So what she's pointing out here too, she's on remand for breaches of probation. Like, some of these people aren't even serving out their actual time. It's like before time, that sort of thing. They haven't been convicted and they're still having to pay these outrageous costs. So Furrow is one of the two representative plaintiffs in a proposed class action lawsuit against Bell, the province, and the province. The other is Ransom Capet, the father of Adam Capet, an Indigenous man held in solitary confinement in Northern Ontario jails for more than 4 years. He frequently spoke with his son, who was in solitary, with the charges from the collect calls leading the phone bills between $250 and $500, some even over $1,000, he wrote in an affidavit. So that would be per month. And when you're in solitary confinement, having that contact with the outside world can keep you sane. Like, it is just, like, the fact that solitary confinement exists in the first place is barbaric. So yeah, he again lives far away from where the prison was, and over the 4.5 years he was held in solitary confinement, which is just disgusting. More than 70% of people in Ontario's correctional facilities are on remand, accused but not convicted of a crime, awaiting bail or trial, according to a 2019 Auditor General report. So yeah, 70% of the people haven't even been convicted and yet are paying hundreds or even $1,000 in phone bills per month. Telephone lines are a lifeline to prisoners' mental health. You can't bring a cell phone into prison, and so the only way you can get to talk with your family and loved ones is by using the Bell system, and the Bell could effectively charge them whatever they wanted to charge them, and they would still have demand, because when you're desperate, you pay whatever you have to pay. Yeah, just that is something that I think a lot of Canadians are not aware about, just the cost of making phone calls while you're in prison and how exploitative it is to have people trapped in this system, because you want them to be better when they get out, but how are they supposed to get better when you take away everything from them, like any gains that they might make? But also another way that Canadians like to exploit workers, well, not Canadians, but the Canadian government, Canada blasted by UN for continuing to allow contemporary forms of slavery. This is a long article, but it's all really good. So I'll link it in the description box below so that people can read the full article. Ricochet is a really good Canadian magazine for news if you want to get news that's actually reliable and accurate. And it goes over how we have temporary workers here in Canada, but they get exploited because they don't have the same labor rights. They don't know about their labor rights. They are brought here for, on farms for the picking season, but they're not given any sort of path to citizenship. And the conditions sometimes are horrid, exploitative of workers, but they get locked into these because they pay a certain amount in order to just be able to come up to Canada to do this job because they don't have the same opportunities in their country, often from Mexico. And then they're stuck in that debt that can take 2 years of salary to pay off just to have the opportunity to work here. So UN Special Rapporteur Tom Moya, I'm sorry, I don't do names. Temporary foreign agricultural workers, because of the limitations of their visas, are amongst the most vulnerable to the phenomena of being exploited. I am deeply disturbed by the accounts of exploitation and abuse shared by me by migrant workers, he said in a statement, adding that many migrant workers face contemporary forms of slavery as they cannot report abuse without fear of deportation. Yeah, so for the few people who do speak up, they can get sent back to their country. There's blacklists apparently where all the different companies will have names of people on it. So if one company labels them as problematic for speaking up for their rights, then they can't get a job anywhere else. Trying to think like where because this is a long article and I read the whole thing and the whole thing is definitely worth a read. Failure of the immigration system. Nava is one of 70,000 plus seasonal workers who come to Canada every spring to work in the agricultural fields and head home again before winter. The exact numbers are hard to come by as there are various overlapping immigration programs and unaccounted for number of illegal workers. Yeah, we got that too here in Canada. Canada, which has been facing a shortage of local field workers for the last 70 years, supports them with legal immigration pathways, but not access to permanent residency. Yeah, maybe if they paid living wages and weren't so harsh on workers, they could find more local workers. Because we get into this problem with, there's a lot of racism in Canada. I know, shocking. There's racism here. And a lot of it is, put towards these migrant workers because they claim that it's because of these migrant workers that their wages are lower and they're taking the jobs away and all this sort of stuff. And it's just, they're being exploited. And that's why they're here, is because companies can get away with exploiting them. So this workforce is effectively only black and brown bodies who are coming here to work for profit of the richest few. Yeah. The reality for workers, as observed during his visit, is far from an ideal one. In some farms, workers are reported to work as much as 17 hours a day, 6 or 7 days a week. Migrant worker is actually a political category, says Hussan, explaining that it can be used to refer to various immigrant categories, from temporary workers in agricultural to care sectors to refugees, even travelers with work holiday visas. Usually it is used to reference anybody without permanent residence status whose workers, he said. Let's see. I'm trying to find I wish, the problem is I could try to highlight this, but then as soon as I click anywhere in the article, it wouldn't be highlighted anymore. So it's hard for me to just, again, this is something that I'm trying to work out in my live streams to make it go more smooth. One thing is maybe not as long articles, but this is a really good article that I think is really informative. So, what's more, workers are often required, either by their work permit or because of the remoteness of the farms, to live in accommodation provided by the employer. Sometimes warehouse one on top of each other, potentially without clean drinking water, says Hassan. At the BC farm he is currently working on, Nava says the housing is unacceptable and there are plagues of rats. Workers try to look for places that are not too bad, but most have little hope of finding a farm where conditions are actually considered good. Yeah, so a lot of these people are isolated on these farms. They're not allowed to go into the communities. Even if they did, a lot of them don't know how to speak English or French, depending on where they are. They're not educated on their rights, and they face such horrendous, abusive conditions. Let's see. The situation is compounded by the debt that migrants may take on to come to Canada. Recruiters in their home countries often require upfront payments to connect workers with a farm, forcing them to take on a loan. And that's what I was talking about earlier. So a few options to defend themselves. Last September, Canada amended the Immigration and Refugee Protection Regulation, temporary foreign workers, to introduce new protections for workers to prevent abuse, requiring, for example, that employers inform workers of their rights, as well as mandating inspections, usually pre-schedule, of work sites. So luckily there are people trying to fight back, and just the call to allow these people who have been coming here for decades sometimes to apply for permanent work status. Let's go back to Meanshot. So Canada, not a utopia. Not by a long shot. And most Canadians don't know this is happening. They don't know any of this is happening, which is intentional. It is. And these are things that, like, part of the reason why it's so hard to deal with what's happening in Gaza is there's nothing we can do about that. But these are abuses and human rights issues that are happening here where we actually do have power to make change, even as citizens, to fight back against the government, to demand better treatment of people in prisons, temporary workers. These are things that are within our control, but we don't know enough about it. Not enough people know about it, or they've been conditioned to think they deserve it. Prisoners deserve to be mistreated. They don't deserve to have anything good because they're bad, they're horrible people, even though, as was stated in the article, 70% of them haven't even been convicted yet. Temporary workers, well, it's better than their home country. No, they couldn't find work in their home country, and that's why they're here. And, they're just trying to provide a better life for their family. It is ridiculous that so much animosity is put on them for just simply wanting to have a better life. And it's the same as, well, it's not the same, but it's like with that young woman, so much animosity is put on her because she just simply wants to have a better life. Like, this idea of wanting to have a life worth living is somehow, that's the bad thing, that's the toxic thing in society, is ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous that it's gotten to this point where people are shamed for just wanting to live a life. Let's check chat. Let's see, how long have I been going? I tend to talk a lot, I think. Yeah, it has been a while. Okay, so I'll quickly read some chats, and then we'll get into the Candace Owens thing, which I'd like to say is a little fun, but she is a horrible person. Horrible. Let's see. My dogs are goth. There's been exposés on farm housing in Canada, inhumane conditions, sometimes human trafficking type tactics involved. Yep. Like I said, I will link this article in the description box. I forgot to do it ahead of time, but it will be there shortly after this live stream so that people can go and read this whole thing. And I say that, and I'm just wondering, does anybody actually do that? Like, do people actually then go back to the article? Like, I know I've gone to articles when I've seen them and they're not linked. I will then Google the title of the article to sometimes read the full thing because I'm worried that it was taken out of context or something, or I wanted to see if there was a bias. But I don't know. Do people actually go down and read the articles? I hope so. The anti-corporatist, whereas most Americans have been brainwashed to think that's okay. Yeah. Same in Canada. Most people have. Soul Life, this is why Shawshank was a good movie. Stop hating on Shawshank. I really liked the Shawshank Redemption. Sad, good movie. BCAT K, those without capital only have their bodies to leverage for money. So if you can't use your body, you're determined useless under capitalism. Yeah, that's why there's a lot of shame for people who are older who can't work as well. Not a lot of punishment towards them. And a lot of pressure to get back in the workforce. And a lot of shame on people with disabilities who can't work. It's all that. Okay, let's maybe just get into the Candace BS that just popped up. Okay, trigger warnings here, or content warnings. Candace Owens is about to say some really horrible stuff about Indigenous peoples, while trying to dismiss queer folks. So it's a 2-for-1 content warning here. It's pretty bad.
I'm wondering, there are dozens of words for two-spirited people, people that would now be considered LGBTQ or trans people in the native languages. So I'd like to know how, as these people have existed for thousands of years before you were alive or anyone else in this room was alive, and before anyone even colonized America, if trans people were around then, I'm just wondering why you think it is that trans people are only here now because the media is telling people these things.
Well, do you think it's weird that I graduated with 0 trans people? Do you think, what do you think has contributed to the explosion?
I'm sorry, I didn't realize there's actually like music in the background of this. I didn't hear it the first time. I'm hearing it in my earphones. Is anybody else hearing the music in the background on this? Because I'm just kind of worried for like copyright stuff, because I can mute it and just say what she's saying. But does anybody else hear the music in the background? I just want to make sure I'm covering my bases, because I'm hearing it in my earphones. I wasn't hearing it when I was just listening to it on my desktop. So just wait for the delay, because I don't know if it's copywritten music or not. Just waiting to see if anybody else can hear that music. By the time you get to this part in the video, you're going to be like, what's up? Okay, MIDI doctors, we hear it. Okay, I don't know if it's copywritten music. Darn it. Yeah, it is really low. That's why I didn't hear it the first time. Slightly hear it. Okay, let's just go for it.
Explosion of transgender people from the time that I was in high school. I'll ask you a question back. If this was just a natural thing, and I don't know what you're talking about with two-spirit people, is this like a Native American tribe, like high, smoking, and talking about your spirit? I'm asking you seriously, because when I think of Native American tribes talking about their spirits, I know that they used to smoke a lot, they used to do drugs, they also were cannibals who used to eat people, so I don't know if we should be taking our cues from cannibals. But
I think
can you
that's
explain
kind
to me
of
what
ridiculous.
two-spirit is in the history?
There are people that would now be considered.
Wow. Yeah, so those are words that formed sentences that came out of Candace Owens' mouth that were really bad. Wow. Just like, Native people were cannibals, so should we be listening to them? Uh, that is just... For those of you who don't know, Candace Owens is racist. Like, she didn't even acknowledge the question or anything, and she just used this to deflect from it, and, like, historically inaccurate? Yeah, let's put it that way. Like, and the idea that, like, she's basically trying to paint it that since Native peoples are basically not human, so why should we be listening to them? It's pretty much the framing that she has, that they're primeval or something of that sort, and they can't be smart if they do this sort of stuff. They can't have a culture or anything because of these horrendous takes. So you know, if they have terms like two-spirit, then, you know, what validity do they have? Wow, just horrible, horrible. I'm just shocked how people like her can have a job. Like, I understand, yeah, right-wing media and all that sort of stuff. But you keep on wondering where the bottom of the barrel is, and then you get there, and you realize there's like this little hole. And then that hole gets really big. And then you go down and you realize, no, you're not at the bottom of the barrel. There's another barrel under there. And then you get to the bottom of that barrel, and it's like, oh, but then there's more, isn't? And you realize that, like, there's a hole, and each barrel you go down, the water is just getting more and more rank and toxic and stewy and bacteria laden and grossness. And I don't know if there is a bottom barrel at this point, if they can get away with saying stuff like this. There's just... so condescending, so dismissive, so racist, so everything wrong. Because Indigenous peoples, Native peoples, have rich cultural histories and a lot of elements that I actually very much admire and wish we could embrace in this Western culture. Because, you know, for people who don't know, let's actually go over what Two-Spirit is. I believe I don't know if it's as common in America, like in the United States, as it is here in Canada to talk about it. But normally, like when I'm addressing Canadian audience, I'll say like 2S LGBTQ or LGBTQ 2S plus, that sort of thing. It's a lot more common, I think, in Canada to refer to that than it is in the States, although I have heard that it is there. So from researching for LGBTQ2S plus health. Two-Spirit community. Two-Spirit refers to a person who identifies as having both a masculine and a feminine spirit, and is used by some, not all, but some Indigenous peoples to describe their sexual, gender, and or spiritual identity. As an umbrella term, it may encompass same-sex attraction and a wide variety of gender variants, including people who might be described in Western cultures as gay, lesbian, bisexual, transsexual, transgender, gender queer, cross-dressers, or who have multiple gender identities. Two-spirits can also include relationships that could be considered poly. The creation of the term two-spirit is attributed to Elder Myra, sorry, I'm horrible with names, who proposed its use during the third annual Intertribal Native American First Nations Gay and Lesbian American Conference held in Winnipeg in 1990. The term is a translation of the... I am sorry, there's no way I will be able to say that. My apologies. But yeah, just a translation of a term to two-spirit. So some more information in the Canadian Encyclopedia. So I'll also have some of these linked down below so people can read more into it. But so Two-Spirit is a term for some Indigenous peoples. Me, as a Westerner, as a white person, I don't get to use it. And I'm okay with that. Yeah, no, that's fine. It's not a term for me. And there is most likely going to be white people that be like, how dare you? Why should you be able to use? No, we don't. No, no. There's lots of terms for us. We don't need to be using this one. It's specific for their communities and roles within their communities, because often people in the different bands, in the different groups who were two-spirited had different roles to play within that community. That's the thing, like this was always part of our global history, to have people who are queer, who are, not binary gendered and stuff. And they embraced it. A lot of these Indigenous cultures embraced it. And it was something that, had a part in their society, had a role to play. And I wish that is something that was carried on here. And it's not just the communities or the bands of Turtle Island. And for those of you, again, who might not be aware, Turtle Island is what Indigenous people called Canada in North America. So Westerns came over and called it Canada. So, but there's this list here of other different terms for across many cultures, both biological sex and gender are intertwined. Examples of this include, and this is a small list. I had a larger list somewhere else, but like all around the world, when you take it out from like the Western East settlers and stuff, who basically forced these things out of cultures, but they were already there in so many different cultures, and they had names for them and terms and roles that these people played within their communities, and all of that was taken away from them by people like Candace, who wants to erase people like me from society again. Like, this is nothing new. Queer folks are nothing new. Like, she tries to say, like, why is it suddenly that there's so many more people? And it's because, Lance from the Surfs, when he was debating Tim Pool, had that graft of left-handedness and stuff. And it's only because they're being more accepted now. People are able to talk about it more. Like, when I was in high school, I didn't have the language to know non-binary. All I knew is that I never quite felt right as a girl. And I did question my femininity, but not in a way, because a lot of trans children, they know that they are male or female. But with me, I didn't know I was non-binary because that term simply didn't exist. So it wasn't an option. So I felt like I had to settle for female. And even like trans children back when I was in high school wasn't really a thing either. So as more people are becoming aware of it and talking about it and expressing it, the more people realize that that's who they've always been in some cases. And younger generations have the option of embracing it far sooner, which is amazing. Like, I wish I knew about this stuff when I was younger. Of course, growing up in my conservative household, I probably wouldn't have been able to express that part of myself until after we left my stepfather. But still, at least then, I probably would have been able to put two and two together back then if I had known that this term existed. But then you just have monsters like Candace Owens, who comes out and wants to erase all the progress we're making because it makes her money. She gets to make a little bit more money, and the more shocking she is, the more right-wingers embrace her, because it's almost like she feels like she has to be even more shocking because she's a Black woman who's in this setting, so she has to prove to all of them that she's horrible in order to be accepted as one of them, which she will never be. Like, she will never, I never understand the need for people to want to be accepted by groups of people who hate them. And it is just, I look at her and I've got to question, does she have any soul left? Or did she sell it all off, like, completely and utterly? And I know some people would be like, well, she had to have a soul to begin with. And I know there's lots of jokes there. I can never understand. Like, here's where I have a lack of empathy. I can't understand how people can be that hateful. Like, even to some levels of hate, I can understand it. I can understand the background, where they got to it, the teachings and everything. I can understand it. But to go to this extent, I don't get it, because to me, money would never, you can never pay me enough money to say that. Never. It is just, and it's also trying to paint it like Native peoples were brutal and all of this sort of stuff, and trying to make it sound like, you know, these Western cultures, the Europeans, oh, but they were never like that. They were never horrible or barbaric. No, they were horrible and barbaric. Like, when they were doing all of their colonizing, the things that they would do were horrible and barbaric. Actually, it reminds me of a story. I don't know the name, but I remember the story back when the British were colonizing the Irish, and just the absolute brutality that was happening there. And there was somebody who was supportive of the Irish. Somebody was bound to know the name of this, because this is a fairly well-known story. And he was trying to talk in defense of the Irish, and he did so by using a satirical piece. So he wrote this satirical thing saying how to prepare Irish babies for eating, and the best age to get them, and, you know, all this sort of stuff. And he presented this as to be like this absurd satirical thing to some of the British elites, and then was horrified when they looked at us. It's like, oh, okay, this sounds like a delicacy. This sounds like a good thing. Yeah, maybe we should do this. Like, I'm sure somebody in the comments knows this story and can, I don't even know if I can quickly is this it? A modest proposal? Oh yeah, it's called A Modest Proposal. Jonathan Swift's argument in A Modest Proposal. A summary of Swift's literal argument that the poor Irish should sell their children as food to solve their poverty. His satirical argument is that wealthy landowners devoured the Irish with their cruelty, so Swift suggested they do so literally. Again, this was just satirical. But, there, let's... So Jonathan Swift uses satire and modest proposal suggested. Yeah, so frequently asked questions. Oops. Oh, I have to create a counter read from this thing? Anyway. Or, I don't know if anybody's interested in this now. Modest proposal. Modest proposal. Sorry, just got me going down a rabbit hole here. Wikipedia page, modest proposal. A modest proposal for preventing children of poor people from being a burden to their parents or country, for making beneficial to... Okay, yeah. Swift's essay is widely held to be one of the greatest examples. So this was back in 1729, yeah. Greatest examples of sustained irony in the history of English language. Much of its shock value derives from the fact that the first portion of the essay describes the plight of starving beggars in Ireland. So the reader is unprepared for the surprise of Swift's solution when he states a young, healthy child, well nursed, is at a year old most delicious, nourishing, and wholesome food, whether stewed, roast. Okay, I don't want to finish reading that. Goes to great length to support his argument, including a list of possible preparation styles for the children and stuff. And then, yeah, basically he was then horrified to realize that they were taking this as like a literal suggestion and that it might be a good thing to do. Ah. Let's just check some chats here. Yes. Looney Tunes, I will give a shout out to my amazing mods and all the amazing people here in here. The couple dozen people have tuned in. I really appreciate you coming in. These first bunch of live streams I'm going to do are going to be really rough as I'm still trying to find my groove, my swerve, I don't know what you want to call it, my flow on how to do this. I'm hoping to eventually become more coherent with my thoughts, be like I'm public speaking or something. Let's see. My hair is nice and crunchy, so I like to play with it. Let's see if there's anything up here. Bad lefty. I like babies, but couldn't eat a whole one. Yeah, they can be big. So yeah, I'm going to try to do regular live streams Sunday afternoons and Tuesday evenings. As I mentioned at the beginning of the stream, this Tuesday, I'm hoping to have on Timur to talk about the situation with the NDP and Sarah Jama, to just kind of give updates on that, because both him and I called into the Majority Report about it. That was not planned. It just happened. I was on the phone on hold when he got through, and I was glad he got through, but kind of bummed out I didn't. And I gotta get better at actually, like, when I call into the Majority Report to plug my YouTube channel, because I totally forgot. And then in the description, because they clipped it and they posted it, they put both of our phone calls together, which is great because I did that on my channel too. Maybe that's where they got the idea from. But in their description, whoever made the description spelled both Timur's and my name wrong. Oops. Just think, there might become a time where I'm not going to bother reading the chats because I get so many super chats that takes up all my time. No, I'll still try to read regular chats. I know not everyone can afford to give real chats or real chats and to pay for chats and stuff. I appreciate it when you can, because I put the bare bones monetizing on my channel, so I unclick on this non-skippable ads, because if there's an ad, I want you guys to at least be able to skip it. I say I will do the post or that I will select when ads are done in the reel or whatever, and then I just never do it. I'm not a fan of ads on, well, any internet platform, really. That's a rant all in itself. Let's see. Oh, hello, Adrian. You've come just on time for me to start winding down. And me playing with my hair because it's all crispy curly. My dogs are goth, asking if I will get memberships. I'm leaning against that because I have a Patreon, and I'd much rather people become members through my Patreon than through YouTube. For one thing, more of your money would then go to me. Patreon takes a smaller chunk of it. And then if my channel gets completely demonetized because of my talking about Palestinians and other hot button topics, I don't have to worry about losing my main source of income. So I'm trying to stay away from any sort of membership on my YouTube channel, but if the day comes and I realize that a lot of people just prefer it, then I'm open to it. I just not right now. You want to see kitty Looney Tunes? Yeah, there was one earlier. Also, in the near future, I'm going to be talking about Anna Kasparian in her little show on the PBD. I always think like peanut butter and sandwich, like peanut butter and jelly sandwich when I hear that for some reason. PBD. It has nothing to do with peanut butter, but that's all I think about when I hear it. The Peanut Butter Podcast. Yeah, I have thoughts on some of the things that she said during that. So I will probably go over that. I don't know if I'm going to do it in a video or a live stream at this point, because when it comes to video, I promise I'm going to get the Million March for Children video done. And like I said, this Tuesday, tomorrow is going to be on to talk about the NDP and Sarah Jama. Also, there'll be other things I'm sure to talk about. Oh, and for the people who are new here, I like showing this off because, you know, this is a Canadian channel anyway, but here you go.
Today in Canadian news.
I just like doing that. I want to get in there one for Maple Wash. I need to figure out how to put in a video into the main screen where it's just the GIFs and not the full thing, so I don't have to cut back and forth. I'm not sure how to do that yet. I'll look in to see if it's even possible. I don't know. That might only be things that I can add like in post. So people, if you can sign up to become a patron. The link will be in the description box below. I also have an Amazon wish list. Thank you so much to the person who got me. It's the second pet taxi. So I had a pet taxi and now I have got 2 more. So I have 3 for 3 cats, which is just a lot of relief. So that if there's an emergency and I suddenly have to pack them all up to go, I can. Because that's something that people aren't necessarily aware of. Plus the one that I have, the original one I have, it doesn't have much life left in it anyway. It's going to fall apart soon. So having the 2 pet taxis for the cats, it's really handy. Oh, poor little Lanier. He's going to the vet next Friday to get a little snippy. So, yeah, he's finally old enough. And the rescue that I got him from covers that fee, so I don't have to worry about it. I just have to get him there and back. So he's going to be a whole new kitty next week. Also, follow me. Oh, yeah, I should do this. I forget that I can... There we go. So you can follow me on all of these social medias. You can check out my... It's all mirrored here. It's frustrating. You can check out my art at sandeelovas.com. See about getting a portrait or a print of some of my artwork. I feel like I'm missing something that I should be plugging. Of course, my wonderful, amazing mods. And everyone who's come out, I appreciate you all. Oh, right. I don't want to leave on such like negative notes, so I found a couple fun little things. Let's see. So some good news in Canada. We are so very grateful to everyone who believes hockey should be a safe, inclusive, and welcoming space for all. We are extremely happy that NHL players will now have the option to voluntarily express important social causes with their stick throughout the season. So, yep, there had been a ban on pride jerseys, rainbow tape on their hockey sticks, you know, but I think some people pushed back a lot so when the NHL started to show support for Israel, but said that, you know, pride tape was too political. So that decision has been reversed. Yay! Small little win. Oh, silly Canadian news.
Call your friend in Ottawa, Mr. Singh, Jagmeet, 1-800-JAG-MEET, and say, remove taxes from carbon taxes. Because
So this is someone, I think he's a conservative, who was just kind of in during question period saying, oh, Jagmeet Singh, I'll make up this phone number and do this and call him so that you can complain about the carbon tax thing that they want to do and blah, blah, blah.
Because that'll help put more money back in people's pockets.
Welcome to 1-800-FREE-SEX. If you are a man seeking a woman, press 1. If you are a woman seeking a man, press 2. If you are a man seeking a man, press 3.
That's what that number led to.
Seeking a woman, press 4.
I did call it. It's a sex line.
Oh no! I would hope that they didn't know that was the case.
And you know what else?
Maybe that's why that number came to him so quickly. It's because he knew it was a sex line. And that's in our Parliament record forever. But good on the reporter to actually be like, I wonder what happens if you dial 1-800-JAG-MEET. And there's this fun video that I came across. And this video, it's not Canadian. I don't know. It could be Canadian. It could be nothing, but it is ridiculously fun, and it's going to be in your head for the rest of the day. My cat, yeah, my cats were just totally freaking out. Well, Abernathy freaks out when he hears that sort of thing. That's just something cute, fun. You can check them out on TikTok, the Keffiness. Yeah, I will remember to link this below too, because I like to give credit to people who have much larger platforms than me, I'm sure. You know, it's not like I'm going to give them a boost in numbers, but you know, I like to acknowledge, I don't like just stealing content. Because, yeah, it's going to be a rough little while, so it's okay to just take a moment every now and then and find something to make you laugh. And also, actually, some actions for people to do to feel like, because when you get into an action and do something, you know, it makes you feel better. So let's go back to, oh, who wanted to see a kitty? Where is it? Where is it? I'm looking it up on here. Don't eat the bracelet. I'm looking up the, here we go. So don't forget, if you're in Canada, to go to our Commons and fill out this, like if you're Canadian or a Canadian resident, to fill out this petition here, to sign it. And I know the person who helped to initiate this petition, and they do make a difference, and she needs 500 signatures by December 10th in order for it to be read into the record in Parliament by the MP. And just over halfway there. So please, if you're Canadian, go there. I will also remember to link this in the description box below. Another kind of action thingy that I want to do, just want to start getting people more informed in politics and stuff in general in your life. I want everyone who doesn't already know to find out who your mayor is. Just look up who your mayor is, look up a little bit of information on your mayor. Because you'd be shocked at how many people do not know who their mayor is. And, you know, if we do it just little bits at a time so it doesn't feel like education, then hopefully by the time the next municipal election comes around in your area, you will know, you'll be informed enough to get involved. Here, come here, Abernathy. There we go. Got this beautiful kitty here. Yeah. So tune in on Tuesday, where hopefully Tamora will be joining me. Still working out how to end these things. I hope this stream went okay. Again, it's going to take me a while before I find my footing with all of this. And he's going to try to eat the mic stand. No, people want to see your beautiful face. People want to see your beautiful face. There we go. So, any final questions from people in chat? Look at the color under his neck. Oh, I love that. You have such a beautiful pattern. Let's see. And, yeah, try to be kind to yourselves today. The news, from what I gather, it's going to get pretty rough over the next while, so just be kind. And he wants to eat the necklace. No, don't. Also, you know, try to be kind to your neighbors as well. And all that sort of... And I'm not seeing any new questions. Okay. No bad luck. The news isn't going to get better anytime soon. So it's important to stay, you know, energized and charged as much as you can. So when the opportunity comes around that we can do something to help, we can do so 100% with our being. I plan on staying as charged as possible. After this, I'm going to be watching a Fast and the Furious movie. Because I like those types of movies. To just kind of help me unwind and stuff of that sort. And so that I can continue to cover this horror news. And try to bring it to you in a, you know, I wouldn't say a lighter way. But, you know, a satirical way. A way to make it go down easier. I'm hoping, again, as I get more comfortable with this, some of my humor can come out more. For those of you who watch my videos, you know I can be funny at times. It just reminded me of something because my brain works this way. David Dole recently had a video out, and I just saw the thing of Pierce Morgan, you know, blasts Americans for their gun culture or something, and there was a picture of a Kinder Egg on it. And it's just one of those things like, I did a Rebel HQ video about gun culture in the States, and I used the example of Kinder Eggs. And I made it into a really funny video, and nobody knows about it. Like, just all that time on Rebel HQ, and nobody remembers my genius videos. Maybe I should link that below too, just because. I don't know. I made a very fun video. Oh, right, you Americans, you don't know what Kinder Egg surprises are. Huh? Because it was banned in your country. Because they're chocolate eggs with little capsules. They're not little, actually. They're quite large capsules, like the size of a walnut, that had little toys that you can put together in it. And they were banned in the States because you can't have something that isn't food within a food thing. So think like a peach. You know, a peach pit and stuff. So that got banned in the States. But guns, no, those are okay. And yet, it doesn't matter how hard I throw a Kinder Egg, it's not going to cause a mass murder. But, yeah, you can go back to I actually, on my YouTube profile thing, I have it linked to my Rebel HQ playlist. You can go back and find it. It's a fun video. Fun video about a horrible subject. Such a beautiful kitty. Yeah, you're such a beautiful kitty, Abernathy. Hunger Games. I remember that video. I thought it was a good video. It was banned because we might choke. Yeah, that was the theory. That, you know, a kid might swallow something the size of a walnut by mistake. I don't mind the chocolate of a Kinder Egg. But if you're allergic to hazelnuts, then it might be a problem. So if you go to like a person who is allergic to hazelnut convention and like force feed a whole bunch of people Kinder Eggs, then you can do a mass murder. That's how you do it with those. Yes. He wants his attention now, so if I try to kick him off, he's just going to jump back on my lap. Oh. Okay. I think I've said enough. So, again, thank you everyone for coming out, and I hope to see you next time. Salut, à la prochaine. Thank you for watching and stay tuned. I'm Sandee, wishing your tomorrow is better than your today.